And we're ready to start, ladies and gentlemen. I think this will be a very exciting bout.
Which single year in the history of the UFC saw the most iconic fighters join the roster? For this video, we're going to take a dive into every single year since the promotion's beginnings and give a mention to a few roster additions that stood out, either for their accomplishments inside the octagon or just because they were pretty memorable. And as far as you guys are concerned, I want to know which year, between 1993 and the present, has produced, in your opinion, the most memorable signings. So be sure to let me know your outright pick or even a top 5 in the comment section below. Anyway, let's get into it. Up first, of course, is the year where everything began. The year that brought us the one and only UFC 1, and with that, the debut of legends Royce Gracie and Ken Shamrock, two pioneers whose names still carry some serious weight in MMA legacy discussions. 1994, the sophomore year for the UFC, saw the promotion expand their output to 3 events, as opposed to 1993's 1. This year we saw the emergence of the future superfight champion Dan Severn, as well as fighters we remember for very different reasons in Mezger and Joe Son. 95 was another year of building for the UFC, with the debuts of tournament winners Marco Ruas and Oleg Taktarov, as well as memorable pioneers in Paul Varelans and Tank Abbott. 1996. 96 was a year that saw the promotion continue to pick up steam, as icons like Frye, Gary Goodridge, and the godfather of ground and pound, Mark Coleman, made their first walk. Not only did this year produce the very first heavyweight champion in Coleman, but slowly you could see MMA's identity as a combat sport of its own coming to the fore. We also saw the first announcement gig from the great Bruce Buffer, whose voice would colour each major octagon bout for the next 25 years. 97 was a big one, a really big one. This year brought us the debut of several undeniable legends, champions like Tito Ortiz, Vitor Belfort, Frank Shamrock, the 2-time tournament winner Mark Kerr, as well as the most champish champion who ever was, in the 5-time belt holder Randy Couture. Throw Kazushi Sakuraba into that mix, and it's pretty clear this was a special one. We also saw the first UFC appearance of Joe Rogan, who took up a role as a backstage interviewer before he would eventually jump onto the commentary desk full-time in 2002. Sorry about that, folks. Mike Goldberg also hopped on board in his lead commentary role this year, a position that would last for 2 decades until his exit in 2017. 1998. As we move into 98, you'll see that the UFC are really starting to pick up some steam, moving into their golden era with legends like Chuck Liddell, Dan Henderson, Wanderlei Silva, Pat Miletich, and the perennial contender that was Pedro Rizzo. Some real heavy Hall of Fame vibes off 98, that's for sure. You'll notice that there aren't too many off years from here onwards. With the light heavyweight and heavyweight divisions really taking shape, the lighter weight classes were helped along in a big way by the additions of Matt Hughes, Jens Pulver, and Evan Tanner. Also, the legendary duo of Bas Rutten and Kevin Randleman only served to further bolster the heavyweight ranks, with both men touching UFC gold before too long. The year that marked the turn of the century might not be a frontrunner, but we did get future heavyweight champions in Josh Barnett and the somehow still very relevant Andrei Arlovski. A few other noteworthy names included Renato Babalu Sobral, Matt Lindland, Shoney Carter, Dave Manet, and the terrible fight shorts of the future that would come courtesy of Dennis Hallman, if you can even call them shorts. 2001. 2001 proved to be a big year for the lighter weight classes, as their divisions were improved significantly with the additions of the bona fide legend BJ Penn, Dean Thomas, Sean Shirk, Yves Edwards, and Matt Serra. Memorable heavyweight talents in Rico Rodriguez and Frank Mir also debuted, 2 guys who would of course go on to capture promotional gold before their exit. 2002 was another so-so year for roster additions, but that's not me taking a shot at the fighters the UFC did sign. Genki Sudo came across from Japan, and Tim Sylvia burst onto the scene with the knockout victory that would eventually lead to his title shot. Also, 2002 just so happened to bring us Robbie Lawler, need we say any more? 2003 might not win your vote outright, but signings like Josh Thompson, Caro Parisian, and Rich Franklin were all big ones. All underrated fighters who had careers well worth being proud of. Also, if you watch this channel often, you'll know I'm a huge Nick Diaz fan, so thank you 2003 for that. 04 was another decent year with one major standout, but trust me, we're heading into some pretty heavy territory soon. Guys like Mike Brown and Patrick Cote are remembered fondly by fans from this era, but 2004 also brought us perhaps the biggest signing so far on this list. The unbeaten Canadian superstar, Georges St-Pierre, a man who many, myself perhaps included, still consider to be the single greatest fighter in mixed martial arts history. 2005 was the year of The Ultimate Fighter, with guys from season 1 and 2 making their debuts, including but not limited to Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner, Diego Sanchez, Josh Koscheck, Kenny Florian, Chris Lieben, as well as the heavyweight season 2 winner Rashad Evans.
A guy who brings flavor.
On top of that, memorable additions like Nate Marquardt and Brandon Vera made their first walk, although all of these names pale in comparison to the future two-weight world champion, the undefeated, undisputed, never even lost a round trailblazer that was Chael P. Sonnen. 2006 was a year that can certainly rival 2004 on the back of one major signing in the form of the longtime middleweight king, Anderson Silva. But there was more to this year than just one man's first appearance. Fan favourites in Clay Guida, Joe Lozon, and Roger Huerta made their first walk, while also a certain future middleweight champion in Michael Bisping touched down in the UFC after his own Ultimate Fighter success. Okay, we're officially getting into some serious territory now. With the golden era of the sport in full swing and the promotion's popularity at an all-time high, future champions Frankie Edgar, Shogun Rua, Lyoto Machida, Fabrizio Verdum, Rampage Jackson, and the former Pride King Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira managed to get in on the action. Add guys like Mirko Krokop, Demian Maia, Anthony Rumble Johnson, and Nate Diaz into the mix, and you certainly have perhaps the most well-rounded year so far. 2008. But if you're looking for the front runner up until this point, our vote may well go in the direction of 2008. Big talents like Shane Carwin, Ryan Bader, Matt Brown, Jim Miller, and Dan Hardy are all well and good. But when you toss in divisional greats like Rafael dos Anjos, Junior dos Santos, Brock Lesnar, Cain Velasquez, and the future GOAT candidate in John Jones, yeah, 2008 was a pretty good year for Dana and his team. 2009 was a year that displayed a UFC that was very much in transition. Big signings included the future welterweight king Johnny Hendricks and a number of fan favourites and contenders in the form of Mark Munoz, Kimbo Slice, Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve, as well as Alexander Gustafsson and Carlos Condit, two guys who could have won UFC gold with a different set of judges. 2010. 2010 was a strong one, even if it likely won't win too many votes. The standout signing here was the future lightweight champion Charles Oliveira, but guys like Jake Shields, Rory McDonald, Mark Hunt, Edson Barboza, Phil Davis, and Takanori Gomi have all certainly done enough to carve out their own slice of MMA history. On a quick side note, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to let us know in the comment section below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the like button if the mood strikes. Anyway, back to the video. 2011 was always going to be a frontrunner. The dissolution of the WEC brought an entire roster's worth of great fighters to the lighter weight classes. Jose Aldo, Dominic Cruz, Demetrius Johnson, Uriah Faber, Chad Mendez, Joe Benavidez, Ricardo Lamas, Cub Swanson, Anthony Pettis, Benson Henderson, Henan Barao, Dustin Poirier, Donald Cerrone, Chan Sung Jung, not to mention the other fighters they signed like Stipe Miocic, Tony Ferguson, TJ Dillashaw, Chris Weidman, and Alistair Overeem. Also noteworthy here is the commentary debut of John Anik, who jumped onto the UFC broadcast desk for the first time after spending a few years working at ESPN. Yeah, this one is pretty stacked. To follow up the last year was going to be a tough task no matter what, but this year's additions were pretty strong, again with a few major standouts. Antonio Bigfoot Silva, Ian McCall, Stephen Thompson, and the future light heavyweight champion Glover Teixeira are no joke. But then you have modern day legends in Robert Whittaker, Max Holloway, and yet another GOAT candidate in Khabib Nurmagomedov. A very strong year with major implications for the sport in its current form. Speaking of implications for the sport in its current form, how about the 1-2 combo of the two biggest superstars the sport has ever known in Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor? Add champions like Tyron Woodley, Luke Rockhold, Daniel Cormier, Juliana Pena, Miesha Tate, alongside Yoel Romero, Ronaldo Jacare Souza, Kyoji Horiguchi, Gilbert Melendez, Gegard Mousasi, and Kelvin Gastelum, and that's one hell of a lot of talent for 1 year. This was, of course, the first appearance by women in the UFC as well, with the bantamweight division being the sole division, for now at least. Strawweight would join bantamweight the next year, with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Carla Esparza, and Rose Namajunas filling out that division. Elsewhere, huge additions in the form of future champions Henry Cejudo, Eddie Alvarez, Leon Edwards, and Aljamain Sterling join fan favourites in Paul Felder, Yair Rodriguez, Gilbert Burns, Beneil Dariush, Brian Ortega, and Derek Lewis, making this one a pretty strong year by any metric. Some years just stand out. They just bring something to the table that no others can match. And as things stand, 2015 appears to be speeding onwards to the pole position by the addition of the GOAT himself, Artem Lobov. Okay, but in all seriousness, 2015 was actually pretty heavy when it comes to elite caliber fighters. Kamaru Usman, Valentina Shevchenko, Holly Holm, Francis Ngannou, Cody Garbrandt, Islam Makhachev, and Darren Till round off a very solid set of signings. Some real pound-for-pound credentials to be found on this one. 2016 might be considered an off year based on the high standards we've seen the UFC hit so far, but I really don't think you can consider a year that brought us Alexander Volkanovski to be that bad. On top of that, the former flyweight champion Brandon Moreno also made his first walk, and then you have guys like Curtis Blades, Marvin Vettori, and also Mike Perry, who I guess deserves a mention too. This year also brought us CM Punk though, so there's that. 2017, in my opinion, was a great year for sluggers. Calvin Kattar, Taito Ivasa, Paulo Costa, Davison Figueiredo, and the all-time king of the performance bonus, Justin Gaethje. Joining these guys, you have the eternal prospect Sean O'Malley, the man who probably bet John Jones in Dominic Reyes, and one of the sport's biggest what-ifs in Zabit Magomed-Sharipov. We've certainly got a lot of great fights out of 2017's crop, a very strong year. 2018. Now as we move into these pretty recent years, you will notice that there is a drop-off in numbers, mainly because of the fact that a lot of these fighters are still in the process of carving out their legacy. But that doesn't mean we didn't get some great ones. Israel Adesanya is a bona fide middleweight legend already, and Zhang Weili could be headed towards her second strawweight title reign if she can get past Carla Esparza. Then you have top contenders in Corey Sandhagen, Kai Kara France, and Magomed Ankalaev to round out a pretty solid year for the UFC scouting team. 2019. Again, it's important to note that there were a huge number of fighters signed this year, but if we are to boil it down to big names who have already made an impact, I would really have to leave this year's picks as Cyril Gane and Ben Askren. There are indeed a lot of great prospects here that will probably turn into something special, but for now, 2019 is a work in progress. 2020. What's interesting about 2020 is that it could actually have more championship level talent already in the mix than the year that preceded it. On the strength of Jiri Prochazka, Hamzat Chimaev, and Tom Aspinall, you have three fighters who look set to be major players in their divisions over the coming years. But considering that I'm not dipping into untested prospects for this list, 2020 comes in a little light. And finally, we come to 2021, the entry that stands as the final year on this list, due to 2022's lack of resolution, and as you might expect, it joins 2020 in just having a handful of fighters. This year we got Michael Chandler, with him being probably the standout addition to the roster, although I would have to say that Alex Pereira comes in with a pretty solid second place. And if you want to talk about star power, then of course, Paddy Pimblett can get a mention, but that pretty much wraps up our year-by-year breakdown. That leaves the decision up to you guys. So which year do you think brought us the most talented overall additions to the UFC roster? Again, either a single selection or a top 5 will do. Do let us know how you see it in the comment section below, and if you want to like the video and subscribe, that would be awesome. As always, thank you for watching.